Welcome to the Keiser Report. I'm Max Keiser. Now, aside from being an expert on Asia, our guest, Paul Schulte of Schulte Research, is an expert on banking fraud, financial technology. He's joined us again for a special on banking sector in 2015. Stacy?
Hey, so, Paul, we met you in Hong Kong. Mm-hmm. We flew you here with us, right? And I wanted to talk to you about this. Cairo and Central, a high-class version of Tahrir Square. You're talking about Hong Kong here.
Yep.
What's the economic cause of the umbrella revolution in your mind?
It's in one sentence, it is hundreds of thousands of middle-class Chinese who are some of the hardest working people in the world and have had stagnant wages for 15 years and are seeing an increasingly wider divergence between rich and poor and have a fear deep down that they're going to be consigned to sort of a poverty class. And
you told us something interesting, and it's in your report there. Tell us how Chris Patent relates to this. He was the guy in charge for the UK when the British Empire ran Hong Kong up until 1997. What did he set in motion that is causing a lot of the financial distress?
Yeah, well, there's a guy called Leo Goodstadt. Leo Goodstadt was the head of the policy for the British government, and he wrote a book that basically talks about how Hong Kong blew its prosperity. And we go back to the sources of this, and Chris Patten sort of brought, privatized the government, from the Thatcherite revolution into Hong Kong in his last 5 years, from 92 to 97. And a lot of the new CEOs of Hong Kong took that, and ran with it. And, Leo Goodstadt would make a point that that was an inappropriate, policy move in Hong Kong.
So how do we actually see the result on the ground between what it was and then, what does it mean to privatize the government? Was it... Yeah.
Well, a retardation of benefits for elderly, a retardation of university and public school education systems, a retardation of hospital care, for instance, right? Where there is a mentality where, we are not going to have anything that remotely resembles a welfare state in Hong Kong. That is a total non-starter, and that sort of discussion by the government in alliance with these hundreds of thousands of people who are on the streets is a complete disconnect. Because does that mean that you're just going to say that we're just going to, privatize the school system and just leave it alone, and we're going to, we're going to leave alone the university system and the medical care system and the any system for the elderly? And this is the profoundly rancorous discussion that's going on in Hong Kong right now.
So, Paul, when you talk about privatization, here in the UK, for example, the NHS, the National Health Service, is undergoing privatization. Yep. And people point out that when the government's running the health system, the administrative cost is roughly 3%, 5% of overall costs. Under privatization schemes, that runs up to 25%.
Yep.
And so you're just adding a lot of administrators, you're adding huge amounts of middlemen, and it's very much ineffective. So is that is the model the same in Hong Kong? Is privatization similar all over the world, whether it's Hong Kong or the UK, or it's just always the same as in your observation?
Well, what happens in privatization is that without some sort of coherence from the government, what happens in privatization is a natural conclusion of capitalism, which is that a small number of parties create cartels. And this is precisely what has happened in Hong Kong. So you have basically a cartel of supermarkets, you have a cartel of convenience stores, you have a cartel of property, you have a cartel of telecommunications. And so basically you have 5 families who own, something like 70% of the economy in Hong Kong. That is the end game of unfettered free capitalism. And that's what Hong Kong is searching itself, where they now perceive that something that was a highly efficient economic distribution of goods and services has become a corrupt cartel.
And so tell us also what the Gini coefficient in number is in Hong Kong and how it relates to revolution.
That's right. So when you have this tremendous concentration of wealth in the case of Hong Kong, and basically five or six families, the Gini coefficient is a measure of how much money is on one side with the richest and how much money is on the other side with the poorest. And so the bottom third of Hong Kong only own about 6% of the economy, and the top small percent of the economy, these families own more than half. And so what happens is this Gini coefficient, when it pops above 0.5, you tend to get social unrest. And Hong Kong's number is currently 0.54. So this is higher than some really like messy Latin American, backwards countries, right? So this is one of the highest in the world, and it's certainly far and away the highest in the OECD of the 42 or 43 countries in the OECD. So this is not surprising, and people feel they're cut out of the pie. They feel like they're on the verge of being pushed into the poverty class. I teach in MBA programs in Hong Kong, and I teach hundreds of students every year, and I see on their faces a lot of anxiety. Am I going to be able to get a job when I get out of here? And of course, you also have the issue of the competition with mainland Chinese who are coming as well. So there's another issue here we need to talk about.
Yeah, we wanted to talk about mainland China because I think there's a big misperception here. First of all, in the West, we're more concerned about Hong Kong. But you're saying in terms of the Hong Kong to China is only 3% of their GDP. So it used to be 20% under Chris Patten.
Yes.
So it's less and less important. But just like in London, just like in Vancouver, just like in New York, everybody's experiencing the flow of billions and trillions coming out of mainland China.
Indeed. And also you have that flow of talent. So somebody made a very good point. If you're 1 in a million in Hong Kong, there's 8 of you. If you're 1 in a million in China, there's 142 of you.
Yeah.
So what's happening is increasingly you have people who are hungrier, smarter, brighter, more aggressive, more curious, more spongy, just taking in everything, coming in and participating in MBA programs, for instance, and they're now, in many cases, some of the top students in my MBA courses, whereas 7 or 8 years ago, that was clearly not the case. And so
we're always
this is
told
also
not to worry about the mainland Chinese. Don't worry about them as competition to you because they're not inquisitive and they're not challenging and they just do rote learning.
Oh, indeed, that's not the case at all. In fact, that's something that I might say is something where, the Hong Kong educational system will tend to produce people who are more rote learning. And so there needs to be a wake-up call for the education system in Hong Kong. Now, who built all the university systems in Hong Kong? The developers, the property developers, right? So University of Science and Technology was built by Henderson Property. It should be called Henderson University, right? And these guys were, smart enough to realize they needed to give back to the community. And so each of these universities is built by, billions of dollars of property development money, which is fair game. But we need more universities, more scholarships, more support, more educational programs for students in Hong Kong, and there just isn't any initiative on the part of the Hong Kong government to do something like this.
Let me ask you about the mainland China economy is contracting from its extraordinary growth levels to less than extraordinary growth levels. Is there any kind of notion that to grab growth wherever it can, is the economy that's now off the boil, is that adding pressure?
It's certainly adding pressure everywhere because what's happening is when the economy is coming off the boil, and also I think that prices have pretty much peaked. Property prices have pretty much peaked in China. So the smartest people I know in China are saying, wait a minute here, there's, Spanish property is trading at 90%, 90% discount per square foot than Shanghai or Beijing. I'm a fool not to go to Madrid or Barcelona or Berlin or the south coast of France or Los Angeles, San Francisco, Hong Kong even.
Okay, this notion of one country, two systems. Okay, that's the way they describe mainland China, Hong Kong.
Yeah.
Now, this seems like that's being erased. I mean, pretty much, and that's becoming one system. Where are we in the gestation there? It's not like New York versus America. It's a lovely place that has its own set of rules. I'm from New York, and I go over the flyover states. I don't care about those people in the middle.
Yeah.
It's not like that. It's like, okay, they really feel when you're in Hong Kong, they're like, we're in Hong Kong, and there's mainland China. There's two different countries. But it's one country. So when is that going to be completely erased, or if ever, am I overstating that?
Yeah, I think that's an overstatement because when I was in Beijing maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago, I talked to some people who I've been talking to for many years who are at pretty high levels in the Chinese government, and I got the impression, very clear impression, and that's what was borne out. We don't give a damn about your problem. You guys figure it out. We're not doing anything. You figure it out. You figure it out with LegCo. You figure it out with the students.
Hold on a second. First of all, what is LegCo?
LegCo, the Parliament of Hong Kong.
Going on to say, basically, in Hong Kong, that they want universal suffrage.
Yep.
Okay, which in America, that means women get the vote, or everyone get the vote. But that's not true in Hong Kong. Everyone already has the vote. So what does it mean in Hong Kong, universal suffrage?
Well, hold on a second, though. If you look back at the basic law and look very carefully at what the Chinese agreed to with the British government, there was not one single word in the basic law that was ratified as a treaty with the United Nations that said that China was going to give, universal suffrage to Hong Kong in 2017. There's not. I know people who were on the joint liaison group negotiating that document. I talked to them.
Meaning people in Hong Kong, but again, break it down for me. Meaning that everyone in Hong Kong can vote?
You can vote, half of the votes are direct and half of the votes are indirect through functional constituencies, through, functional constituencies are basically industry groups.
Okay, so this is more, I guess, direct vote. Direct, yes.
And so I want to move on to Macau has had a 30% plunge in revenue there this December, and this is caused by the crackdown on corruption. They say. In the last minute here, what is really going on with this crackdown on corruption?
I think it is real. It is absolutely unequivocal. It is extremely brave. Xi Jinping has all the cards in his favor right now. There's been more than 65,000 people arrested. He just went after Hu Jintao's #1 man last week. This is like going after the chief of staff of the United States, right, of the President of the United States.
And he's chasing some people into the United States.
He's chasing not only the United States, everywhere, Australia, United States, Hong Kong. He has a very long arm out to get people money back. And I heard when I was in Beijing, they want to get back something close to $300 billion plus US dollars of money that was stolen, largely through the budget package in 2009. That was the expansionary budget package.
So this isn't just one political party going after the other political party. It's bigger than that.
Much bigger, way more profound, and very, very daring for that man to do what he's doing, because he is risking life and limb to do that. And he's been fairly safe so far, and we hope he stays safe.
All right, Paul, we got to go. Thank you. All right, stay tuned for the second half. A whole lot more. Welcome back to the Keiser Report. I'm Max Keiser. Time now to turn to William Bonsai 7. Bonsai, welcome to the Keiser Report.
Thank you, Max. Welcome to Hong Kong.
Oh, it's been a fantastic trip. Now, Bonsai, everyone knows your financial crisis started from Zero Hedge and my own website. I should point out that you've had 168 million views of your art just in 2014. So you are really a phenomenon out there. Give us some of your backstory, which gives you the insight into the mind of the bankster, because I think you've captured the mind of the bankster in iconic images at William Bonsai 7. What's the backstory?
Well, the backstory is that I think there are a lot of capable people, such as yourself and others, who are dealing with this problem of banksterism head on and doing a lot of writing. And I started off doing writing, and I decided, no, what I'm going to do is something else. And that's how I got into this, what I call visual combat, which is trying to hit them from a different angle. So I take all the information that we are listening to constantly about what's been going on, and it's not just what happened in 2008. It's been continuing. It's been an ongoing story. I twist it around inside my right brain lobe, and I spit it back out as a picture.
Okay, now, if you look at your artwork, and I'm a big fan, it's layering images. You take photos, you have a catalog of images and photos, and you have, Bernanke and Yellen, and you have folks, and the way you construct these compositions is quite interesting, and they're very memorable. It's almost like a collage technique, if you will. I'm not really conversant in all of this, but how would you describe that technique? Because it's very unique. It's very interesting.
It's interesting. What inspired me with this was actually started in the 1920s. The Berlin Dada movement, where they started using what they then called photo montage, did very, very insulting, derogatory images of Adolf Hitler and nice people like, Mussolini, and that was how they were basically fighting back against what was then the main scourge, fascism.
That was during a hyperinflationary period.
That was during the hyperinflationary period. So if you go back and look at their artwork, they would take drawings and combine it with photography and all kinds of interesting things. And I always liked that, but I never really had any reason to deploy it. And as a photographer, I always did photoshopping, and this became a natural thing for me.
Well, German Expressionism, I think, also came from this period.
Well, yeah, German Expressionism preceded this period, but these people were called the New Realists, the New Objectivists. And basically, instead of doing pretty pictures, they would do things that were very, people considered it vulgar because it was the truth. They would show big fat banksters They would show pictures of, obnoxious-looking soldiers and politicians and what have you, and they would show them in all kinds of very.
I remember seeing a couple of exhibits at the Pompidou Center in Paris of this art from this period, and it really, as you say, the vulgar is a good word that it captured at that time. In your work, you get into the mind of the bankster and the vulgarity of the wealth and income gap, the vulgarity of the thought process of a central banker, that they can simply solve any problem by just printing loads of money. So anyway, you leap forward to today, and you've kind of updated this approach.
That's right.
Tell us about this year, 2014. You did 168 million images or views of your
168 million
views of your images.
Thousands of images.
What were some of the more popular ones, if you can tell us?
I can't tell you exactly what was the most popular one. I can tell you there, in my catalog, one that was very popular was the Wall Street periodic table of criminal elements. And I basically took all of them, all the perpetrators, and I rearranged them in the periodic table and gave them all names like elements. And that one's been very popular for a long time now. And people who are familiar with my work know that I'll do a lot of different things. I'll take movie posters and I'll do parodies of movies using all these familiar faces, and it's basically just striking the same problem from a lot of different angles, because different people,
You talk about referencing the new realism of Germany in the 1920s, and of course that led up to a period of enormous European upheaval. And gave us a political nightmare. Some would describe it. Some describe our current period with all kinds of revolutions happening around the world. Here in Hong Kong, you got the Umbrella Revolution.
Right.
Do you think politically we're on kind of a similar wavelength? Although the result are not the atrocities we've seen in Europe at that time. We see these financial atrocities, which some would call the velvet atrocity, and that you don't see necessarily the violence of it. It kind of it ends up in ways that are not immediately apparent.
Right. Well, it's almost a cliche. History repeats itself, but it's true. It resonates. And if you go back and look at events back 100 years ago, even going back to the turn of the last century, you'll find lots of parallels. And if you look at it too much, it becomes frightening. But there's a truth to it. So an amazing thing for me has been, I go back and I look at illustrations going even as far back into the 1800s. And I look at the cartoonage and the caricatures and the messages that the artists were.
Well, Hogarth in the UK, of course.
Hogarth, Hogarth.
Talk a little bit. Is there any comparison there?
Well, yes. I mean, the character artist.
He was brutal against the fat cats of that era.
Yeah, and then later in the U.S. there was Thomas Nast, and I look at all of their artwork and I actually use many of their works and I readapt them to today. So what is very interesting is all you need to do is change the faces and adjust the message a little bit, and there are so many parallels. This whole idea of the people at the top of the pyramid, the 1%, enriching themselves at the expense of everybody down at the proles or the workers or whatever it is. It's nothing new.
Would you say your art is guerrilla art?
Subversive, yes.
It's subversive. In every political movement, there are subversive artists that are subversive at the time and then go on sometimes to become, less than subversive. They define the era. But here in Hong Kong, during this period of political turmoil, the name that came up for me, the only one I've heard is Eric the Artist, for example, is a local legend already on the art scene. Do you know his work?
I'm not familiar with Eric the Artist, but I will tell you that I went down to all of those Umbrella Revolution sites, and there was a lot of spontaneous artwork that was created, and I was very impressed. And a lot of it was crowd work. I mean, they had this one wall where they had all these little stickers, posters, and everybody would put little messages, and they were all different colors, and it was on this huge wall. It was beautiful.
That's very interesting. So it almost mimics the social networking.
So everybody went down there, left their message, yeah. And so it was like a mob, whatever.
It's like a mimic of the social networking effect. So
yeah, exactly.
Through social networking, you have little bits of information coming together. People hear where the protest is. They go to that corner. They're suddenly there.
Collaborative art.
Collaborative art.
Yep.
And so here, just to be clear here, so they're using little stickers, posted stickers, and they're creating collaborative art in a way that's also very...
Actually, what's beautiful about it is that wall was not even intended to be a work of art. It was basically people would go down there and leave messages. And there were thousands of these things, and the whole staircase all around was covered with these little, they were different colors. And when you looked at it, you said, this is beautiful.
Yeah, it also doesn't cause any damage, presumably, because they're easily removed.
They were very, very, in terms of how they behaved themselves, they were very well behaved.
Right.
So there was no vandalism or damage, nothing like that.
In some cities where this is a concern, chalk is also used because it's very easily washed away, but it can be used to
They were
get
using
messaging.
chalk. There was no permanent vandalism done there. And a lot of the people down there would do things. They would take pieces of paper and make umbrellas and hand them out to people as tokens and stuff. It was very interesting. It was a very nice thing. And
So you're a long-time resident here in Hong Kong. You moved here from the States.
yeah, well, I've lived all around the world. So
You've lived all around the
I've
world.
lived in the States. I grew up in the States.
You've been
I've
here
lived in Europe.
Been here a while.
Yeah, I've been here a while.
And you love it here.
I love it here. Hong Kong is a very exciting place. It's a crossroads. Obviously, as a result of what's happening in China, there are a lot of reasons why Hong Kong is a happening place.
And as far as the banksterism art, do you think you'll run out of material anytime soon?
No, luckily, I think these people are going to keep me in business for quite a long time. And it's spread out from just simple fraud. For me, it's spread out into, how does central banking work? What is the nature of money? And then the whole corrupt power scheme that, that we're constantly looking at, which drives into the political side of the whole thing as well. And I haven't seen anything reformed, quite frankly. I just see things are being swept under the rug and getting worse. And now we're all waiting. It's like the pre-war years, too. If you go back and see what people said back then, they said, there was always one crisis to the next. We never knew when it was going to explode. We knew it wasn't good, but, it never happened. It never happened until finally, boom, the crisis hit.
Right, there's always a crisis, it seems. There's always...
Yeah, and then there's some Band-Aid or some amelioration that makes things better, and then all of a sudden there's a crisis again.
Right.
And we're going through a period like that. We have, first it's this, what we had with subprime, then all of a sudden what was happening in Europe, and now, we've got all people...
The ruble crisis.
We're worrying about this trillions and trillions of dollars of derivatives, and we're worried about all this fake money that's been printed out now, and all the debt that's been created, and no one knows what's going to happen next.
So your prints of your work are in high demand, and you have a global audience, again, thanks to the internet. Here in Hong Kong, do you have much of a following here in Hong Kong?
Well, I have some people. Generally, Max, I stay away from local politics like a good guest. So I've made it a rule that, I can observe, but I will not engage in any kind of political activity here because, I'm not a Hong Kong citizen. So, and frankly, I tell people I'm an American citizen, and I'm embarrassed about the way we go around the world lecturing other people.
But people here in Hong Kong can have access to what you're saying, understanding that the characters are pretty much the same everywhere in the world.
I think we have an element of that. Obviously there's no shortage of banksters and, crooked financiers anywhere in the world, and this is a financial city. So people here understand, when we had this blowout in the U.S., a lot of people suffered because of Lehman. There are a lot of people here who know what Lehman was. They don't know what the subprime crisis was, but they know Lehman blew up. What happened? Why did that happen? So, and it's the other very interesting thing is if you watch the local news here, they're always talking about Bernanke and Yellen. The local person on the street here is more familiar, in my opinion, on what's going on with the central bank in the U.S. than Americans. Americans are la, what's Kim Kardashian doing? But, here, on the local news at night, the Federal Reserve Bank said this or that, and how will that affect us? And, they're actually very concerned about it.
Well, because the dollar is a world reserve currency, nobody in the U.S. has to be concerned about what the central bank is doing in the U.S. But they are concerned in Hong Kong, China, elsewhere in the world, because that's where the rubber hits the road. That's where the effects occur.
First of all, the Hong Kong dollar is pegged to the U.S. dollar. So...
Right. We got about 10 seconds.
Okay. Well...
William Bonsai 7, thanks so much for being on the Keiser Report.
Thank you, Max. Great to be here, and thank you very much for all your help.
All right, and that's going to do it for this edition of the Keiser Report with me, Max Keiser, and Stacey Herbert. I'd like to thank our guest, William Bonsai 7. If you'd like to get in touch, go to Twitter and find us Keiser Report on Twitter. Until next time, bye, y'all.